Hello and welcome to our Retire Early lifestyle. Glad to have you here today. So today we're going to talk about an area of retire abroad that is usually not just swept under the rug, but literally buttered up and sprayed with whipped cream and a cherry on top. And why not? After all, doesn't that make you smile? I always smile at a hot fudge brownie ice cream sundae. But the saying, "you're as old as you feel," is quite literally truth. People in their 50s are not generally considered old, but some 50-year-olds can barely walk. And since the average age of expats living abroad is approximately 46.2 years old, with a significant percentage of retirees being 61 years and older, it's also relevant that we know 70-year-olds who are very spry and active and can do just as much as 40 and 50-year-olds. So let's first talk about walking when you move abroad. We met many expats over the course of our 13 years living abroad, and many of them shared one common theme, and that was bad knees and ankles and or feet. When we were showing expats rental homes in Ecuador, some of them would tell us, "I've got bad knees and I can't walk very far," or "my knees are bad and I can't do steps." We helped a lot of retirees, but some of them were younger than us and couldn't walk very far or do any steps at all. And so, because they couldn't really walk much, many of them chose to hire a taxi cab rather than walking. That's not really a big deal in Latin America, but try that in Europe, Australia, or UK. You will definitely notice a lighter wallet if hiring taxis in Europe very often. But you really shouldn't have to. Most of Europe has buses, trains, and light rails that don't cost too much, and the same in Latin America. Some expats simply buy a car, but that comes with its own nuisances. Some expats want to leave all that car stuff behind, and most do, but some people can't seem to live without a car, no matter if they live in the city or not. In Ecuador, the public bus was only 30 cents, but some of the expats thought the buses looked too rickety and old, and they also had 3-foot-tall steps you had to climb up just to embark onto the bus, which takes a bit of physicality. Thankfully, Ecuador now has the light rail system, but it may not be going where you need to go. Then what will you do? We were friends with an older expat couple, both in their 70s, and they lived outside of the city of Cuenca, and they were always hiring taxis to go here and there. One day he complained to us that the taxi fares were costing him over $400 a month, and that was 10 years ago, before everything doubled. "That's crazy," we said to him. "We were paying less than that in our rent." So if you do not feel comfortable taking public buses in some of these countries, and actually that's where most of the pickpockets and robberies occur, and you can't walk much, you might want to calculate a large taxi bill into your cost of living estimate. The USA is a car culture. People don't walk much in the US. They drive, and most areas in the US are so spread out you need to have a car, although that is changing somewhat. But in other cultures, people walk a lot and they take the bus. But if you decide to live outside of the city there, it's not going to be public bus transportation to pick you up, usually. You'll have to have a car or hire a taxi or an Uber. If you live in the town or city, for most expats, walking serves them just fine, if it's not too far, but we're not saying the sidewalks will be wide and straight without potholes and crevices, drop-offs, and tree roots poking through the cement, if there is a sidewalk. Some expats have no problem walking at all, but fall and get hurt because of the sidewalk terrain. Things are protruding where they shouldn't, and the expat glances up to look at the beautiful colonial architecture, and they trip and fall. We've both tripped on a curb in the middle of the road, and I fell so hard once that it threw me clear across the street. I literally landed on the palm of my hand, holding a camera in the other hand and skidding on my palm and wrist to the other end of the road. Moving to a foreign country can be more strenuous on your physicality. You may have to dodge cars when crossing the street. You may have to stand up on the bus or light rail because all the seats are taken. You may have to climb steps into buildings or walk up steps into the city center or into an apartment building. We're not going to lie to you. It takes more work and effort physically to live in a foreign country. For example, the #1 best rated country to live in the world, according to the Global Retirement Index, has some of the worst walking sidewalks in what is supposed to be some of the best neighborhoods. This clip was taken in an area of Panama where there are lots of grocery stores, restaurants, fast food joints, and high-rise condominiums where expats live. But as you can see, the sidewalks aren't that great and the traffic can be volatile. The Rams forgot to tell you that pedestrians do not have the right-of-way in Panama, so if there is no pedestrian walking light, be careful. That's all we can say. Of course, lawfully, we all know that the driving manual says pedestrians do have the right-of-way at crosswalks, but the cars don't listen to that. Believe us, they don't listen to that, even where there are crosswalks.
Whoa, I'm in a crosswalk. Hello, whoa, whoa. Buffoons. And he's yelling at me. Just so you can see, it's a crosswalk. Of course, that doesn't compute.
Did you hear about the older gentleman that fell down a manhole in Cuenca, Ecuador? This was a travesty. We lived there at the time of the accident. Apparently, the city was working on some underground piping, and when the day was over, they simply put a few 2x4s over this big deep hole in the ground and then laid a board over the top of the 2x4s. There was no yellow tape or sign saying to be careful, and this senior citizen walked on top of the board and it caved in. You know the rest of the story. He lived, but he was badly hurt and had to go to the hospital. This sort of jury rigging is prevalent in developing countries and even in Southern Europe. Now, I don't mean to be so negative about Southern Europe, but it's like living in Latin America, and in some ways, as far as service goes, it can be worse than Latin America. I know it's a first world country, but really in Italy, Greece, France, Portugal, and Spain, it may as well be Latin America. By the way, who do you think created Latin America? The Spaniards. The locals already know their country is full of shipshod improvisations and that it can be dangerous like this, and so they are very careful. But if you're new in town, how will you know? How will you know that the board will collapse and you'll fall into a deep manhole? We've even seen these manholes left uncovered. Just a big hole sitting there wide open waiting for someone to get swallowed up into its depths, just as the sun is setting and you can't see them. Many of these touristy cities seem built up with great infrastructure, but once you get there it can be a challenge for mature people and those with bad knees to get around town. In Italy, for example, many of the apartment buildings will not have elevators. Even if it has 6 floors, there's no elevator. We saw them. We know they're there. Of course, these are the apartments they can't rent to foreigners, and so they remain at the local rates. But they're just as nice as the more expensive ones. So there's a secret for you when you go abroad. We lived on the top floor of an apartment building in Italy and did the 4 flights of stairs every single day, sometimes 3 times a day. Every time we went out, we had to do all these stairs. It was a workout. Fortunately for us, though, we have been taking care of our health for years and can still climb up and down stairs. Not surprising, our rent was only $340 instead of $850. Most people don't think about environmental issues when they move abroad. There are many aspects of living abroad that can make life more challenging, such as high altitudes or excessive heat and humidity. We really need to know ourselves and our endurance levels before we move anywhere abroad. We helped an older expat couple, both in their 60s, who just moved to Cuenca, Ecuador, which is 8,400 feet elevation. We were helping them find their dream rental home for a great price, but unfortunately they never got a chance to live in it. They were only in Cuenca overnight when the wife woke up in the middle of the night unable to breathe, and they had to call an ambulance, and they took her to the hospital. The husband told us she had COPD and the altitude was interfering with her breathing, and they had to leave Cuenca right away. We were shocked because she seemed fine when we went out to lunch with them. But these stories are not new to us. We shared many a video explaining that anyone that has health issues, especially breathing and upper respiratory ailments, should not travel to high altitudes for any reason whatsoever. The altitude exacerbates health issues and is not advisable. Unfortunately, our videos do not meet the YouTube standards and requirement of keeping everyone feeling happy and joyful. And therefore, our reality-based videos get buried alive while the vested interests and shills tell everyone what their ears want to hear. You know, the dreamy paradise life. The truth is, us conservative truth-tellers can't control an AI algorithm that has been pre-coded with data that is biased towards Americans moving abroad and leaving their orange man bad, terrible country. Can we? But I'm veering. Sorry about that. And then there is the water issue. Who wants to move abroad where the water is teeming with feces? That's the real question people should be asking themselves. If some of you are already compromised by this or that, and you plan on traveling abroad, then it will not take long to become sick from parasites or a bacteria from the water. That's it. Not going to say anything else about it. And lastly, learning a new language when we get older is more difficult, and one reason is because we're not really into it. We get set in our ways and we just want to have an easy retirement, not go to school all over again. Who wants to learn a new language in their 60s and 70s? The reality is most people don't, and so they don't. Frank learned a third language in his 50s, but that's usually the exception. Even those hard and true folks who say they are taking lessons may learn a few phrases just to get by, but once they leave, they're gone and they forget what they learned. We're not saying you can't learn a new language when you get older, but statistically it's more than likely not going to happen. And that means you may feel isolated from the community in countries that do not speak English. Well, we know that's true because we hear it from expats all the time, and many of them come home because they feel isolated. It means that the locals are going to keep disparaging Americans for not learning the language when they go abroad. So as the saying goes, a trend in motion stays in motion until something derails it. So that's it for this video. Hope you enjoyed that. Take care and bye-bye.